name is Khalid Bey. I'm the chair. Also, members present, Councilor Joe Kearney, Councilor Pat Hogan, Councilor Ronnie White. In addition, we have present Councilor Majoke, Councilor Allen, Councilor Green, and Councilor Paniagua. All right, and so I'm assuming I've just made a determination at our last meeting that Jim Conroy really runs this show. Jim, who we have first? Yeah, I know. I'm talking about which department? Zoning?
Since you already want to go with the DC grant.
Yeah, let's start with that on, please.
Good morning, Councilors. Owen Kearney with the City's Planning Division. Two items before you today. A grant, a request to apply for and enter into agreement for a grant with New York State DEC. This is for the remediation or the cleanup of a brownfield site on Erie Boulevard East, 1410 Erie Boulevard East, which is just east of Beach Street, sort of behind the credit union there on the corner. It's a vacant lot. It has been a brownfield for years. The city completed basically a plan for the site and issued a record of decision, which is a formal sort of document that the DEC agreed with about a year and a half ago. The DEC is now making sites that have a record of decision statewide or eligible for cleanup funds. This is a site that the DEC approached us about and said you were eligible and essentially encouraged us to apply for cleanup funds for the site. The estimated project cost is over $500,000. I've included a not to exceed amount of $600,000. The DEC covers 90% of those costs, and the city must cover the other 10% of those costs. And those are actual costs for the cleanup and the administration of that project. So the items before you are essentially twofold. One, authorization to apply for that, and along with that, cover the 10% city obligation, which would, again, that not to exceed amount would be $60,000, or 10% of the entire amount. And in doing so, that would be obtained through bonding, which is the second item before you, bonding to facilitate this work. It is a productive, our intention is to turn that back into a productive use. We've had property owners and business owners in the area interested in the site. It's been city-owned for decades. People occasionally informally use the site already, and this would allow us to clean it up, get it back on the tax rolls, and put it back into productive use. And happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions from our committee members?
Yeah, I've got a question. So, Commissioner, you mentioned that there was a plan submitted and or developed in relation to the site. However, I don't see any plan attached to the letter. Can you go in a little bit more detail what you mean by plan for the site? Sure.
So the city, with New York State DEC funding, really back in around 2000, was awarded funding to evaluate the site, test the site, excavate part of the site, see the extent of the contamination on the site. We worked with a consultant to do that work and produced basically an evaluation document saying, here's what's on the site, and here are the options for cleaning it up. And basically those documents have three options. Do nothing, do something, on one end of the spectrum, do nothing, which is obviously inexpensive, but doesn't really produce many results. Fully excavate the site, very expensive on the other end of things, and then in the middle, kind of a middle ground where we clean up the site, make it available for redevelopment, and basically lays out those options. That's what the plan entails. Happy to forward that plan, that record of decision to the committee, to the councilors. That was ultimately approved, I think, last spring. I think it was March of 2020. Laid out those options, and the DEC then references that plan and says, we're willing to fund this. And so that's how we arrived at that cost. That isn't an estimate that I came up with. That's an estimate that essentially the DEC approved in that plan.
Certainly understand. So then it would be fair to say that there isn't any unnecessary planned commercial uses at this point?
No, there are no plans. No land use plans, other than cleaning it up, making it available for really quite a wide variety of options, although it's a relatively small site.
Sure. And then once I guess, provided that we get this grant and it's approved, what's the process next then to determine who this property goes to and how it gets developed?
That would go through the typical city procedure for disposition of city-owned land, which I can't speak to in detail, but I'm sure someone in the room can, but it would go through that typical process once completed.
Thank you.
Any other council on the committee? Councilor Hogan, Councilor Kearney? Councilor Driscoll, any concerns? No? Any other councilor? All right, so I move that we put this item on the agenda. Councilors? Second?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Councilor.
Appreciate it.
My apologies for the phone, too.
No problem. Fancy music, Hogan. We have anything from Neighborhood Business Development? Three other assessment items, okay.
Morning, councilors. Matt OJ, Deputy Commissioner Assessment. We've got 3 items, 3 adjacent parcels, former street right-of-way on the 500 block of Prospect Avenue. There was a vote to abandon those several months ago. We commissioned an appraisal, got a number on that, and developer thinks these are needed to support his project at the adjacent Flatiron style building, so he's going to move forward with this.
Any questions? Thank you.
Councilor, this is in my council district. I heartily approved it. Thank you for your negotiations with the person who's going to redevelop. Thank you.
All right, so that
Happy to help.
Good with that, Councilor?
Yes.
All right, next. Who's next? You got 2 more with,
Yeah, I think
assessment.
you got a couple more here.
Welcome back.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Sorry.
Forgot these are, 3 different items. They were obviously the same parcel. We re-subdivided them into 3 because we've got different ownership of the 3 adjacent parcels, so we needed to carve them out. No addresses yet, but yeah, same anticipated project.
So we go for all 3 items? All right, so we're all set, thank you.
Thanks all.
So Jim, we'll move those items onto the agenda.
The last one for you is your,
All right. So we have members of Siona here. Mike Stanton, if you don't mind, providing a brief explanation, of course, for our colleagues' consideration. Thank you.
Glasses and mask. Mike Stanton, 315 Berkeley Drive. This is an initiative that we've been working on with Councilors Allen and Councilors Bay for several months now. It's essentially to bring Syracuse up to speed with what the other major upstate cities are doing. Back in the 70s and 80s, ordinances in the state that said that a definition of family as people who are related by blood or marriage got thrown out for good reason. Couples that aren't married were getting in trouble. Couples that were gay, let's say, were getting in trouble. And cities looked for a new way to make these ordinances that were fair to people who want to live in a single-family neighborhood, but also were effective. So what all the upstate cities, except Syracuse, major upstate cities have adopted is an ordinance that essentially says if we have a smaller group of people living together, we're not going to look too carefully at that. But if there's a larger group, then it's going to be something like they have to show that they're living together, something like the Golden Girls, a group of older people who are sharing a house. Well, let's not say older people, but adults who are sharing a house like a family, making the house their entire, using the entire house and sharing the entire house. They're not putting a lock on the door and locking away their bedroom every day that they leave, and making it their permanent residence. So what Syracuse is doing is we still have an ordinance that allows up to 5 unrelated persons in a single-family house. All the other cities, Rochester, Buffalo, Albany, say no more than 3 or 4. Ithaca says no more than 2. This ordinance brings us into line with what the other cities are doing. It's been adopted by over 20 cities across New York State. If you take in towns and villages, it's been adopted by more than 80. It's been challenged and upheld by the New York State Supreme Court 7 times across the state. And the reason that we're bringing this up now is that despite all the new student housing that's been built, and it's over 4,500 new beds that have been built in the community, we're still losing family homes near campus, with up to 5 students allowed in a house, unrelated adults. That gives the incentive for landlords to purchase family houses when they come on the market. Since I moved into our house in '95, we've lost about 65 family houses between Berkeley Park and Thorndon Park. That doesn't include all the areas further from campus, but it's strongest, the problem's the most obvious the closer you get to campus, because students will pay $100, $150 more for a room that's near campus than one that's further away. And so what's left of the houses that are renting to students is moving right up to the edge of campus. Eventually, it will take over all the family homes if we allow it to. And that's why we are proposing this. Any questions?
Yes, just real quick, I apologize. What's the number that we're looking to lower? It's currently at 5, but we're looking to lower it to 3?
We're proposing 3.
Okay.
That seems to be the number that makes enough difference in the economics to allow family homes to go to families when they come on the market instead of being snatched up by landlords. And increasingly, the landlords are out of town. When the local landlords saw that the university's building more dorms, they see these huge apartments going up, they've gotten worried, and little by little, as you go down the records near campus, you'll see New Jersey, New York. These are more and more going to people who are not just out of the county, but out of the state too.
All right, so I wanted to, thanks, Mike. I wanted to add some things for my committee's consideration. This has been a long-standing discussion since before I even got elected. And, you know, there's a number of things that I argue that I think are consistent with the concerns that the neighborhood, that Siuna has had over the years. One is, you know, according to state law, you know, zoning rules, when you have 3 or more than 3, I'm sorry, then what you're operating constitute a boarding house. And boarding houses are not allowed in residential 1 neighborhoods. I remember having this discussion many times with the zoning director, Heather Limendola, who agreed with that logic, but we struggled to find a solution to that particular issue, and or an understanding for why we weren't operating in line with that. The other thing that I offer for your consideration, you know, zoning is all about neighborhood density. Whether you're low, medium, or high density neighborhood is relative to the amount of foot traffic and vehicular traffic. Most people who move into single family and 2-family neighborhoods choose that neighborhood because of low density or because of maybe the nature of the environment. You know, our entire effort in terms of neighborhood sustainability and the like quality of life in our neighborhoods around the city is exactly that. I think we have to be careful to not appear to pick and choose where we argue the validity of quality of life. Last thing I'll offer for consideration, and this may come across as a bit unconventional, but in principle, I think everybody will understand. When you talk about residential 1 neighborhoods, and when you give consideration to the nature of the business, you know, rental spaces and the like, this is another discussion I had with Director Limendola, who saw the logic, and not to put words in her mouth, but I believe she agreed with the logic and thought that it should be considered, is that, you know, even though the spaces they rent out are residential, what they're engaging in is commercial enterprise. And while they may not sell car parts or hamburgers, what they sell is living spaces. You know, and that has to be taken in consideration as well as any other corporate entity, you know, being considered to move into a residential 1 neighborhood. We otherwise would not allow it, or we would make adjustments so that the neighborhood would not be disturbed. I think the same has to be given consideration in this instance. And so I offer that for my colleagues, and again, open the floor to any additional questions or concerns.
If you don't mind, Councilman. Yeah, so, I mean, my initial comment, Councilor Bay, and to anybody else that's thinking about this, is this sounds a bit like a exclusionary zoning scheme to me. And I would wonder, is there not any other way to go after absentee landlords without necessarily excluding the number of people that can live in a residence? Like, for example, it sounds to me, based on your presentation, that this is solely a problem limited to the university neighborhood, right? And not necessarily a problem that we're experiencing citywide. So my question would be, is that the case, and that you're solely attempting to target that area? Because my concern would be an area in other areas of the city where there are other single individuals who are grouping together because they can't afford their rent, and now they'd be no longer allowed to do so.
There are areas of the city where zoning does allow rooming houses, and north of campus, we've seen a big expansion of what used to be houses into apartments and smaller apartments into larger apartments. And those are renting out to students. They do it at a reasonable cost, and they don't interfere with, they're not driving families out of family neighborhoods. If you look at the census data for where you find groups of unrelated people that are 4 or more, it's very much clustered around the university. About 75% of it is just within the census tracts around SU. It's rarely seen beyond that. And in our conversations with Corporation Council, they said there are parts of the city where they've had trouble dealing with rooming houses, offering homes to, well, they were saying drug addicts is what they were describing. And they were saying that this ordinance could be useful in controlling that kind of development and use.
If I could add to that as well, just to provide some clarity, Counselor. One, we can't pass laws just for any area of the city. Of course, the effect would be citywide. But I am aware of, and I asked Counselor Allen to be a witness because she brought it to my attention, of what is the equivalent of boarding houses on the south side, where they have locks on the bedroom doors and it's all unlawful. 5 or 6 people living in tiny single-family homes. And, you know, I asked Counselor Allen to chime in if she wished. So it's not just relative to the university, even though you have a larger number there. But this is an issue in neighborhoods throughout the city, and tenants, residents actually complain about it, and this is how we learned of it.
I've seen it several times, especially within my district, not just on the university, but more so on the south side, where it literally is a rundown single-family house, and they're charging about $600-700 just for one bedroom. And they're sharing a bathroom, sharing a kitchen, and they're not related. So it is a problem that we see throughout the city sometimes.
There's a memorandum New York State Department of State has had up for about 8 years, I think, and they look at just this issue. How do you develop a definition of family that is effective, that doesn't discriminate, and that will stand up to court challenge? And they go through a variety of different ways of looking at it by square footage per person, and et cetera, and they come down to the example of the Poughkeepsie ordinance, which was upheld, I think, in '94, and it's been upheld 7 times across the state. It turns out this is all these cities across upstate New York have looked at this issue. This is the one that works. This is the one that stood up to court challenge, and this is what so many of them adopted. I should mention also the town of Onondaga and the town of DeWitt both have ordinances like this now too, which is important because if our ordinance were ever challenged, we could go to them and say, all of ours are now under challenge because they're within the county. We could work together with them to uphold the ordinance. But Corporation Council says, look at the record for this kind of ordinance. It's not going to be overturned.
So 1 second, just in the interest of time, Mr. Stanton, allow my colleagues to add their comments and questions so we can deliberate and we can make sure we get some decision made today on whether we're going to move this item or whether it requires further consideration. Councilor White.
Very, very brief, Councilor Bay, thank you. Just my next comment would just be, if boarding houses are already legal, I would just question the need for an additional enforcement mechanism. And my other comment would be, it's a rhetorical question, that are unrelated persons not entitled to also live in some sort of family neighborhood, right? So, I understand the concerns about boarding houses, I understand the concerns about overcrowding in the students' areas, but there are other additional single people who are trying to board together, again, to have nice affordable housing and nice affordable neighborhoods. And I would just wonder about excluding those people from the benefits that you're seeking to protect and having a nice family neighborhood.
Well, as I say, there are large parts of the city where that is allowed, where individuals can rent rooms and share a dwelling. It's just that there are certain parts of the city where single family, zoned to single family, you need a definition for what single family is.
Councilor Carney?
Yeah, so I guess, I can appreciate and understand where you're coming from with this. My question would actually be more for zoning or codes and how, number one, how enforceable is this and how would we actually go about enforcing this from a city standpoint? Is there someone from code? Yeah, if you would, how would we go about, I understand it'd be going forward now if someone were to seek it, but would we be looking to go back and address previous properties that did this, or how would we go about doing, how would we define that? Because what if, let's say, Councilor White and I decided to buy a house together, or move into a house or rent a house, and it's us and, our significant others, that's 4 unrelated people, would that then qualify that we're no longer allowed to do that anymore?
Well, Councilors, Michael Collins, Commissioner for Neighborhood and Business Development, I would assume, of course, that you'd be staying within your district if you were to do that, right?
Yes, yeah.
So it's a really, really good question, and there's different capacities to do that. We had in our first meeting of the 2 meetings that we had for our when we laid out the mayor's plan for the American Rescue Plan Act funding, one of the things that we talked about, and we talked about in the first meeting, was the housing study that we're doing. We are close to having the RFP completed for that. That is a document that, for us, the intention is to be able to look at something like this. We certainly understand the idea of bringing it to planning now. No argument at all. That is one of those things that then needs to be worked out. The code enforcement this year was able to enact a map of where we have 1 housing inspector and 1 building inspector within 9 different regions across the city. That map was laid out so that the work is equitable within them. And as you've seen in the shared services agreement that's before you and that we're having another meeting on soon, for this particular neighborhood that Mr. Stanton represents, there's the intent within there to be able to hire another code inspector that's specific to that neighborhood. All of that means that there's then the capacity. Your question on getting inside, that's a longer one to be able to do that, because right now, as far as the properties that we're talking about, they would all be rental registry properties. And as you all know, currently we need to talk our way into or get a court-ordered warrant to be able to go into properties if the landlord says no. And that is how we would truly identify where those properties are. So it would take a while for the landlords that are resistant to be able to identify and get through that. It is not impossible, and as Mr. Stanton has said, there's other cities that have a history of being able to do it. So we know that we can get there. We don't know how yet, to be honest with you.
Mr. Collins, is there a position that the administration has on this proposal?
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please?
Does the administration have a position on this proposal?
On this proposal, we don't at the moment. It's something that we tend to look at within the housing market study that we intend to do, but we certainly understand the desire to bring it to the Planning Commission right now, and we don't have any objection to that at all.
So the administration's neutral?
So that's an excellent question, Counselor.
It seems I hear it a lot.
I
I hear that a lot from the administration sometimes. It's neutral.
You hear a lot that it's neutral. What I'm saying right now is that this is actually something that we do intend to study. And at the moment, what we do is we intend to study it going forward within, because to the points of Councilor Allen, Councilor Bay, Councilor White, and Councilor Bay, this looks different in different parts of the city.
Maybe we'll get a determination.
I think I'm going to defer to my deputy mayor.
We'll get a determination of neutrality here.
I'm not going to comment on neutrality. What I'll comment on is the complexity of the issue. the point that's been brought up is very, very significant to that community. The points that Councilor White is bringing up are also significant. And so it is not neutrality, it is really examining all the sides of the issue, because there are multiple sides of important issues.
Because I doubt that the codes department, I work with the codes department quite a bit, you have a terrific codes department, I doubt the capacity of actually enforcing this.
But the one thing I want to point out, though, there is a unfortunate, and I'm going to call it unfortunate, there's an unfortunate mixing of the messages here, and maybe not really hearing some. For example, Councilor White made reference to the fact that boarding houses are already legal. Yeah, but not in residential 1 neighborhoods, which is the argument that's being made here. You can't put a boarding house in a residential 1 neighborhood according to state law, right? And we have a rule on the ground that moves in contradistinction to that. It's a valid argument, and that's what we ultimately are trying to determine, right? But this has been a discussion, as I've mentioned, I've had with zoning for years now. So it's not a new discussion, and there's been an effort to figure it out, but there's been, I think, unfortunately, not enough attention given to it to make a real determination. The other thing I'll offer is this. We all, many of us who live in residential 1 neighborhoods, you got to kind of put yourself in the other person's shoes a little bit. While we're obligated to be objective for sure, and we have a job to do, I think we would probably think differently if we may have been dealing with, I won't use people as the issue more so than I'll talk about vehicular traffic, and that kind of thing, right? And so that becomes a part of the discussion and the issue. I'll give you an example, and I'll make this short. When the viaduct comes down, it will create unintended consequences that is going to blow everybody in here's phone through the roof, because people are going to talk about the traffic and congestion coming down all of the side streets adjacent to the viaduct. That's going to happen. It's unavoidable in some respects, but you'll see a very good example of people making that complaint and drawing the difference between low density and high density traffic, some middle density. So we have many examples of how this will play itself out and what some neighborhoods may be dealing with. I say maybe because I don't live in those neighborhoods, right? But we hear the complaints. And I think those are the things we have to take into consideration.
The question would be, the fullness of the conversation. To your point, Councilor Bay, in residential 1 neighborhoods, will we have, we're trying to predict what we don't know is going to be a residual effect, basically, is what the quandary we're in right now, about what are deemed unrelated adults who are gathered together for altruistic purposes to afford a property, to be able to be somewhere. While we're still dealing with what this particular neighborhood and other neighborhoods are dealing with money-grabbing folks who are just putting a bunch of folks in one property. We've been going round and round about this because it's not an easy conundrum we find ourselves with.
But I think one of the things, and then I'll end here, and if anybody else has anything to add, please do. Councilor White, being an attorney, any other attorney present, are familiar with the idea of words of art, often used in law to skate around existing or established rules, right? And so the question becomes, does the state zoning rule apply to where we are? We know zoning is essentially local, right? But we are an extension of the state. Does the rules apply here? Because if they do in fact, then all those arguments after the fact are moot, right? They're de facto. I'm talking any argument over the years on family and all of that is disqualified if the zoning rules as they stand, particularly for residential 1 neighborhoods at a state level, apply here with boarding houses, and whether 3 or more than 3 constitute a boarding house. This was the argument I made years ago. It was not given real consideration by Corp Council then. We could have been to the bottom of this situation then. And so maybe if we take that route to determine if somehow we are skating around a rule we should be following. I think the discussion that Councilor Hogan and Carney mentioned is valid. You know, are we going retro? That's a lot, but certainly from here on should be a part of the discussion.
Yeah.
You know.
Retro would absolutely be a
that's whole
burdensome
yeah,
capacity
yeah, that's
issue
a
for
bigger
us.
argument,
Yep.
but, you know, to preserve your neighborhood or the other neighborhood down
Mm-hmm.
the street or neighborhoods going forward, I think is the low-hanging fruit that we can really give consideration to now. And whatever comes in, you know, in addition to that, you know, happens, whether it's retro or whatever, but, you know, it's just a matter of what I stated. I don't want to be redundant here, but again, I throw that out for the administration's and my colleagues' consideration. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll just, for the record, I'm not in favor of retroactive for one simple reason. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, my district will be neglected if we have to go back and try and address all this previous sins.
And
So, that's-
Counselor,
if it's gonna be retroactive, I'm a hard no on it.
Counselor, from our end, you know, we're simply looking to, from a code enforcement perspective, we're simply looking to enforce the existing laws.
Okay.
So that's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You know, Counselor, I want to compliment Mike on his continuing advocacy for his neighborhood over the years, but I think this might have unintended consequences on other neighborhoods. I think there's a lot of factors that we have to consider, including the housing crisis that we have in the city too. So I think there's a lot of factors here that we might want to consider.
I would, if I can just make a remark, President Pro Temp, I would just like to say, I concur with Councilor Hogan there, and I think, you know, being Councilor Allen and I share the university district, of course, this applies citywide. This is going to affect every neighborhood. But being the situation with the recent addition of 4,000 odd beds that have come online in the last few years, COVID, the housing crisis, everything that's going on, I would personally like if we could have a committee meeting about this. I don't know if it should go on the agenda. I'm not on the committee, so it's not my consideration, but before we get to a vote, I would love to talk about all the possible consequences of this before we have a vote.
I was going to say that too, Councilor Driscoll. It's necessary that we have an additional committee meeting just on this item.
Have somebody present from Corporation Council as well. I don't see anybody out here now, but I think they need to be involved in the conversation for sure.
In addition, it may be worth it too, in some way, to find out about other neighborhoods who are having this problem. If the concern is unintended consequences or what we may assume to be unintended consequences. You know, the people on Fernwood who called in to complain about the single-family dwelling there with multiple people and locked bedroom doors, they may have something different to say. You know, neighborhoods that are dealing with similar issues may have something different to say, but I think it's worth it, you know, even to Siuna, to maybe galvanize the troops if there's a legitimate case to be made, which I think there is, you know, to the council, so that we understand this is not, while it's in high number in a university neighborhood, they are not the only one dealing with the issue.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
And I think, Council, to follow up on your point, if as Mike Stanton and Siena said, if this has been implemented in Albany, Rochester, and other major cities, there's probably a lot of data and stuff we can look at to understand the situation better.
Yep. All right, so we'll hold that for now for a committee meeting, and we'll schedule that as soon as possible. Yeah, we'll hold it off the agenda.
Neighborhood Preservation Committee, myself, Councilor Green, Councilor Bay, and Councilor Driscoll. I believe I have 3 or 4 items. Most of them are encroachments. Okay. Yes.
I got another one taken away from me? Did I do something?
All right. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Dean Salkage, Permits Director. I have 3 encroachments for your consideration today. 2 of them are for Fountain Street for 115 and 121 Fountain Street for a 4-foot chain link fence. The other is, and the chain link fence is to encroach 2 feet into the city's right-of-way on the Fountain Street side. The second encroachment would be for Shifty's Bar on Burnett, for the establishment of a concrete patio to replace their existing wooden deck, and that is to encroach a little over 6 feet into the city's right-of-way.
The ones on Fountain Street, is that a residential? Okay.
Yes.
And then you said the
Shifty's Bar, yep, commercial.
Yes, Shifty's is a neighborhood treasure that is much loved and valued.
Play there.
Yeah, especially, I might have to recuse myself due to my love of their wings and live music, but I would like to advocate as vociferously as possible for Shifty's to be able to get their deck going.
And those were the only 3 that you had, correct?
Yes, correct.
I'm trying to look at this tiny screen on here with 27 pages. Okay. All right. Any questions?
Councilor Allen, if I could, I'd like to commend Nadia here. She spent about an hour on the phone explaining all sorts of stuff to me. And it was very educational for me, and it was torturous for her. So I want to thank you very much. And
Did you bother her about how to hook up your DVR?
We didn't get that far.
I couldn't get a hold of Joe Hogan. What else? Thank you very much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I second that, Counselor.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And then we have one from the Water Department.
Good afternoon, Beth Smith from the Water Department. We are requesting permission to grant an easement, permission for an easement to Mr. Olish. He would like to build a small shed, garden shed in his backyard, which crosses our right-of-way. Our conduit runs under that property. He does understand the risk if the Water Department needs to enter that right-of-way for any emergencies or repair work.
So he understands the risk. So if you guys have to go back there and remove his shed, or his shed is damaged, he won't try to come after the city for any liability?
Right. It's clearly outlined in the
Okay.
ordinance that he'll sign.
Okay. Any questions or comments on
I'm
that?
sorry, if you don't mind, Counselor, did he sign a release to that effect?
Will he?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Just making sure it's memorialized and not just a verbal promise.
All right. So I'll make a motion to put all 4 items onto the agenda.
Second. All right.
So we'll get into the finance items. The first one is it looks like an IT agreement with Open Cities.
Oh, Councilor Green, Councilors, this is Ruthie Angren, Director of Communications and Marketing for the city. This letter is requesting that we extend the do not exceed for the original Open Cities contract from 105 to 305. The difference being a request coming from authorizing ARPA funds. What the original agreement with Open Cities was for was the scope of work included redesigning the website, giving us the content management system, migrating our equipment, and supporting us technically as we did the rest of the content development and work. Since COVID, we did enter into beta site, meaning we got all the content migrated. There are about 3,000 hours worth of work and content to rewrite. The way that the workforce is currently set up and overextended, content editors across departments don't have the personnel time available to continue writing content. Also, we recognize there is a technical skills gap in just being able to take the old content from the old website, the stuff that we know we need to keep, and then rewriting it. It's taking our content editors on average, 10 to 15 hours per page to rewrite that content. At this rate, we'll never be able to get out of beta. And it's important we get out of beta because contractually, our vendor is only supposed to be with us for about 10 to 12 months. So what this is seeking to do is to use ARPA funds and to go back to the vendor and say, can you provide us support developing content for key departments and doing the data entry, well, not data entry, but converting some of our PDF forms to online forms, which would enable us to get things online quicker. They gave us an original estimate, which was significantly higher. So we went back and renegotiated some of the scope of work down and said, okay, well, can you meet us in the middle? Can you set up the forms for us so that at least when we convert them, they're ADA compliant? And if we identify just 5 departments that we think could definitely be accelerated in you writing the content for them instead of like us trying to train people and get them up to speed, and we landed at the agreement that you see now. So not the agreement, but the estimate that you see now. So just for web content and form development services, it would be another $150,000. We would need about $20,000 in just certificates for, to maintain the .gov domain, to make sure that we get to like secure DNS hosting, web ops hosting, and then we would have to have a contingency of money to pay people for data entry support. Because at the end of the day, there is still data entry that we are responsible for as a city. If we try to give that data entry role over to the vendor, they're gonna charge us a premium for it. So this was a place where we could save money.
So this may not be a question for you, Ruthnie, but this amount, I don't think was in the original plan for the ARPA spending. So if we approve this, where does that come from and what gets reduced?
What I can say is like, under the Enhancing Government and Response Resilience, we did have a line of $2 million for digital infrastructure, data analysis, and cybersecurity. So that would cover things from process improvement, cybersecurity systems, accelerate introduction of new digital solutions, and expand data acquisition and analysis capabilities. So there was a pot of $2 million in there for some of this digital cybersecurity work that we need to do. And ARPA does identify that any kind of funds that you're using to replenish can be used for things like maintaining and upgrading like cybersecurity and software systems and digital infrastructure. So this will be coming out of that 2000 pot line. Some of the same pot line that Microsoft 365 is coming out of.
So there's no reduction anywhere else, it's just coming from that initial? Okay.
Yes.
Questions from councilors? Okay. Are members of the Finance Committee okay moving this one forward?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next one is tax related. Some Matt OJ one.
Good morning, councilors. Ann Gallagher from Assessment. This is for a cleanup and board up charge that was incorrectly put on a property according to code, so we're just putting it through to correct the rolls and take it off.
Any questions on this?
Which one is that?
Crowley Street?
What, Crowley? Yeah, I think there's a misspelling on the second one. Not that I'm good at spelling or not, but
It may have been.
yeah, so, okay.
Yeah, do you know what the mix-up was?
I do not know. I believe they probably were not notified as to the charge, and then we put it through. I think that's normally what happens or they put it on the incorrect property.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone okay with this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the last one is a budget transfer, Budget Director Rudd. I know this is not something directly, but I'll give some background on this. This relates to the council redistricting proposal. So when the council initially set this law into motion and when we did the budget last year, we did not allocate funding specifically for this. So now the committee is meeting and they have identified the expert that can assist them in doing the redistricting and the mapping and the community outreach portion of it. So this is a budget transfer to provide the funding to allow that group to move forward with their process. Do you have anything to add, Tim? Does anyone have questions on this? Yeah, so the budget transfer in here, their total budget is, I believe, 96,000. We've already approved some amount. This is a $76,000 amount.
Is this gonna be like a yearly cost or?
This is a one-time expense to do this. So, I mean, and really, if you think about it, it's the cost of doing it for the next 10 years, right? Because that'll be that. So that's the cost for them. So it's someone from, that's done this in other parts of the country. It's from New York Law School and SUNY New Paltz for the mapping portion of it.
So, Counselor, we're hiring somebody from New York City to come in here and draw the map for us? Is that how it works?
Tim Rudd, Budget Director. Well, the auditor has been charged with overseeing this whole process, and he's put together this volunteer committee, and the volunteer committee has put together this budget, and the auditor shared the budget with us. So I think it has.
Yeah, so Counselor, because I did meet with them to go through it from finance, the person that they're hiring is not creating the data or making recommendations. He's providing the framework that the people that are on the commission will say. So he won't say like put Eastwood here or not, he doesn't know that, but he'll say, here's how many meetings you should have, here's how you can go creating a map, those kind of things.
So he'll be determining what factors are going to be considered to draw the map, in other words.
He'll be providing them with the framework that's been used in other places, yeah.
The framework, okay.
And this individual's getting, we're paying this individual $76,000? Is that, no?
I mean, it's not him personally, the overall cost of the entire.
Okay, that was, this is their full budget of everything that they're, for the deal that they're gonna need.
Other questions? Okay. Are the members of the Finance Committee okay moving this one to the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I believe those are all the items for Finance.
Thank you, Councilor Green. Next. Commissioner, yes. Commissioner, let's start with the greenhouse and go down, okay? Greenhouse, Northside Parks, Cannon Street,
So you want to start with the ARPA?
yes.
Okay. Julie LaFave, Commissioner of Parks Recreation. Just as a note, as we go through these 5 ARPA projects, I do have the 3-member planning team. There's a project manager for each of these, so if we have specific questions, they can either address today or be prepared for next week's study session. So you said start with the greenhouse?
Right.
Okay. So first proposal for ARPA funds is to renovate, repair, bring the greenhouse back up to speed. It is long overdue. It has holes. We have no proper irrigation. This in the long run will save on man hours. Right now we have people watering 7 days a week, paying overtime. It's not a very efficient system. We're not able to plant as much as we'd like. This will benefit the city as a whole because obviously aesthetically we have 150 or so landscaped areas. We just do not have a proper working area right now to be able to stay on top of all of that. We hired a greenhouse crew leader, first time in 10, 15 years, I don't exactly know the many years, but with an actual horticulture degree. So she's gonna work through this. The planning team, who are, 2 of them are landscape architects, so we have very knowledgeable people working on this, but it's gonna bring up our greenhouse to where it should be, and potentially this could become an educational center, a place that we could invite members of the public in, or youth groups, whatever it may be.
This is long overdue. It was great 30 years ago, 35 years ago. It's just gone into decline since then, but I mean, I commend you on doing it.
We'd like to get started on this right away too. This is like, we'd like to start this winter, take advantage of it so that we can see the impacts right away for next planting season.
It's got so much potential. Is there any questions from my Parks Committee? I'll figure on moving this to the agenda.
Yeah, it definitely sounds very, I'm very much in support of it, as Councilor Hogan said. Could you just remind me the square footage of it again?
Do
we
you
know?
have that? This is Josh Wilcox.
Driven by, but I don't think I've ever
Oh, Josh.
explored it.
Josh Wilcox, Parks Department. Yeah, we have 5 to 6 greenhouse facilities over there. 3 of them are 1,180 square feet. The longer greenhouse is 2,900 square feet, and the atrium, which would be used as a community center educational facility, is 2,100 square feet.
Wow, that's great.
Any other questions? Years ago, they used to have a Palm Sunday performance in their music and everything else, and we'd have 15 to 20,000 people go through the greenhouse on a Palm Sunday.
I've seen many tables with dinners
Yeah.
being posted in there.
So,
Bring it back, Hogue.
well, if I stay around.
I have no doubt of that.
My Parks Committee okay? Councilor Paniagua?
Yes.
Councilor Allen? Councilor Driscoll okay?
Yes.
Next up, there, Councilor LaFave.
I also would welcome any of you for a tour if you'd like, if you've never been inside there. Do you have a preference for which one to go over next?
Northside Parks.
Okay, so Northside Parks, this is, we're sticking with the 300,000 to remain consistent so that we're fair citywide. We right now are doing 300,000 out of capital funds for Eastwood. We'd like to designate the same dollar amount out of ARPA funds for Northside Parks. This is, again, it's not a specific project because we'd like to take the success and everything that we're learning right now from the Eastwood engagement, take that same concept, go to the Northside Parks, and the parks are listed on your letter, and do the same, a similar engagement. What amenity or improvement do they need to see, or do they want to see in the north side?
Any questions?
Do you have a projection on when you will know that information?
So if you approve this, we'll get through Eastwood, and then we'd like to start this, let's say, potentially January with the engagement. So this is not any construction that we think that we could reasonably complete in 2022, but if we use 2022 during that time period, there's no reason to believe that we couldn't construct whatever they choose in 2023.
We okay with my Parks Committee?
Yes.
Yes.
And just as it, just, you know, for the logical question is, how come we don't do the next neighborhood? We're eventually going to hit all parts of the city through this same concept.
Excellent. Okay. Next is Cannon Street Playground.
Cannon Street Playground, so using ARPA funds while the building is leased right now for community space to Force. There is a very outdated swing set there. So the building is used specifically by the lessee, but the swings and the area is open to the community, so we would like to put a playground there. A small playground to match the size of the lot, but still it needs something, and that's an area that definitely needs it.
Any questions?
No.
Everybody okay with that? Thumbs up? Yes,
Okay.
okay. Okay, let's switch back to the first one. Let's go for the Spirit of Jubilee Park.
Okay, so the Spirit of Jubilee Park, if you recall, the council already did approve funds for a playground there, so we already have some improvements coming to that park. But Spirit of Jubilee Park has been used for Showcase Sundays, and it has been a music gathering location for quite some time. There's a nonprofit called Jams that they have come to the city every year in my 3.5 years here to request that they have a permanent stage there. We were never in a position to do so. Now we feel we're in a position to do so. So acting on the success of getting a new playground there that we're going to engage the community on, we would like to build a permanent stage there. Jams has committed to this. They will be present at next week's meeting if you guys have any questions of them. But they would like to commit. I've already helped them sort of start to build a GoFundMe, which obviously is not public yet until if and when this gets approved. But they'd like to commit up to $30,000 of fundraising as well to support this. And they would assist in us reaching the community to make sure that this is designed to what that community wants to see. And the idea that this would continue to be used for local artists, but you know, if Jazz Fest ever changed, that you have different locations across the city, that this could potentially be for larger city events and potentially larger names.
That's all I wanted to add. It is not owned by any particular entity. It's a park amenity. This particular group, because of the use of that park, has been for musical events for many, many, many years, has said, why don't we put something permanent there? And they've come to us repeatedly. Here we have an opportunity to actually build something there, but it would be a park amenity, just like any other amenity in the park for any other entity.
Oops, sorry, go ahead.
I totally, I've talked to them about the stage, but the $250,000 price tag is sort of taking me aback. I mean, I would have to know specifically what we're going to spend this money on. $250,000 plus, Councilor Allen knows because we share that district more or less. I'm not sure. I saw we were talking about national acts and things like that. I'm not sure that neighborhood would want a national act on any stage we would build there. I mean, we're talking about a very dense neighborhood too around there.
Historically, and
I know historically.
Can't predict what's going to happen going forward, but historically, it has really hosted local acts, which I think is a great amenity to what goes on there.
And having done all that stuff when I was with the Parks Department, I just want to have a caveat that you're limited, when you put a permanent stage anywhere, you're limited with what that stage. We did this at Thornton Park, we did this at Clinton Square, we did it all over. You're limited in what you can stage there once you put a permanent. So it helps to be nimble. The big thing is having enough power generated in order to do stuff there.
So if you guys approve this, it's going to be specifically tagged and earmarked for a stage. So if the stage only costs for $100, it's not like I have spare money that I can just now spend on something else. We would just close the account. With that said, though, you know, we don't have the exact amount. We'll come back to you guys with the design if you'd like, because obviously the community is going to be involved. There's going to be a lot of people, but we want to have enough money so that we take advantage of technology, and we put sound in there so that we don't have to have a city electrician there. But it would be at the control of the city parks department. It wouldn't be on 24/7. That's much like any of our pavilions right now. There might be outlets, but they're not turned on for 20. We control it.
Yeah, I mean, I would. What part of ARPA money is this coming out of again?
Just out of the parks. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to hold on to this. I'm not going to advance the agenda. I want to have a meeting on this and flesh it out a little more as far as the items, as far as these items go.
Do you want a committee meeting or just a meeting at
I
Parks?
think probably a commit, well, first, maybe it will meet, and I'll get a list of
Okay.
things that are, itemized list of things that is going to be included in this package.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything to say on
I
this?
just a comment.
Santiago?
Yeah, just a comment. With the redevelopment that is coming to that area, it makes a lot of sense to get the park up to speed as well as the rest of the area. But maybe we should look into Pat's comments. Maybe we should look into what else is happening around the park so that everybody better understands what the development is all about.
We also would hire, professionals would be involved in the design of this as well. We wouldn't put a stage that takes up half of the park so that you have no room for a gathering or an audience. So it would be built and designed specifically with the footprint that is there. But I'm happy to get whatever information you want or have any type of meeting that you'd like. And I can get Jams. Like I said, they were going to come on Wednesday anyways, but I'll put a hold on that and just wait for you for a follow-up.
So we have we'll speak about it. We'll talk about as far as the itemized list of what exactly is going to be involved in this whole thing.
They have a very rough scale drawing that they completed a few years ago.
You mean this?
Jams, because this has been their goal all along, previous to us.
I talked to them.
Right.
And, but I would like more of a, professional input on it too.
Councilor Hogan, if I may add something else for consideration. When we did the small stage at Sankofa,
yes,
we were required to get the immediate neighborhood support through petition and the like, and so, that I think should be a part of the discussion. What the deputy mayor said is true. There's been national acts and local acts there over the years. Juneteenth used to be right in front of Southwest Community Center. The difference was, they knew the stage was bigger, the sound was bigger, and so it seemed like it would be necessary. I'm familiar with Jams. I know that Reggie Siegler is the president of Jams. And I think the only person that is a member of Jams, and I could be wrong, that's in proximity is Horace. He lives across the street. Everybody else lives far away from there. So, it seemed like they're just as a safety measure to get some kind of sign-on from property owners, White Street, South Ave, Lincoln Ave particularly. Should be a part of the discussion. I agree with Councilor Hogan on the price tag. We didn't spend that much on the stage on South Salina Street, but certainly, I know they have been pushing this for a long time.
Yes.
But interested to see what the discussion would be at the committee meeting, even though I'm not a committee member. I digress, but
I will say that the Parks, thank you for the comments. I will say that the Parks Department is, because every neighborhood is completely different, that we rely heavily on public engagement and not just people who, who speak the loudest, the people who are the neighbors, just like you say, the people who live there, the people who actually frequent the park on a daily basis, not just when there's musical events. So no matter what, whether you guys approve 50,000, 250,000, or just we do our playground, that's going to be part of our process anyways.
So the total project is, you're expecting to spend is 250,000, and then they're gonna give you a donation of 30,000, correct?
If they can successfully raise that much.
Okay.
They haven't done any fundraising because I told them don't fundraise for a project that isn't funded potentially yet.
Right, okay.
Just real quick, 250 is a placeholder.
Okay.
We're gonna do the professional schematics, get the input of the community, and look to see what we have. We don't wanna spend that much on that stage.
Okay.
Right, because it's always harder for me to come for 150,000 to find out that it's 175,000. So that's the idea here. So again, so if you guys very specifically say, even if we want to say, this square footage, whatever this square foot, we could be specific. And then again, if at the end of the day the project's completed, then we just close the account.
I
Yes.
get Councilor Hogan's hesitancy.
No,
250,000. That's a gigantic stage. And so I get it. I understand the placeholder though, Deputy.
We want to make this more though than the Sankofa stage. The Sankofa stage is a stage. It's just a platform, right? We want something, right, a pavilion essentially over it, a roof. So we expect that there'd be a cost with that if you want something permanent that's, we're seeing this skyrocketing price of steel. So if depending on if that's the type, we can't keep up with the fencing prices right now, the pavilion prices, everything is just sky high. So 250 might be absurd, but it also might not be.
Also, the community might not want the elevated don't know yet, but the placeholder is there, so money is available.
We'll talk.
Just let me know how you'd like to
We'll talk,
proceed.
and we're-
Okay.
We'll,
You're going to love the next one then.
yes, and the next one, the same thing. We'll
Okay.
talk. I think this is a great idea.
Yes.
You know, recognizing our veterans and all that, having the
Yes.
Memorial Kirk Park, it's perfect. I was part of the, you know, with the Parks Department when we did a whole redo of
So,
Kirk Park.
okay, so we'll go on to the next one. Kirk Park?
Kirk Park, well, I'm going to hold that one until I find out more
Okay.
about that, because that's $250,000 too.
Okay.
So that's $500,000 for the Parks Department. We'll just want to discuss it, that's all.
You guys told me to get greedy. This is on you.
Okay, okay. So we'll discuss it, and then I might have a committee meeting on
Okay.
it. I'm more concerned about the neighborhood around, I'm also concerned about the neighborhood around the Spirit of Jubilee Park.
Okay.
If they buy into this
Okay.
too, so.
Okay, so move
Okay.
on away from ARPA though, for right now.
So can you
Yes.
at least mention it, because I don't have the letter in front of me. The one
Oh,
that
for the Kirk, you want to know what the
Yeah.
concept is? Okay, so for the Kirk Park Memorial, if you are on the side of the Kirk Park where the creek walk is, there's a bridge to cross into what we know as Kirk Park. Right across that bridge, there's an open space where we have planted young trees sort of in the area. That area right there, there is no memorial dedicated specifically to minority, past, current, future of the armed forces, all branches of the armed forces. So, working with the Dunbar American Legion Post, we would like to design something there with all flags present, feature some of our more noteworthy Syracuse veterans. They want to use it also to encourage and inspire the local youth that they can do great things, you know, either by becoming active in the military or just becoming active in their community. We want to use, we want to build, so we want to, it's not just the memorial, it's a path to the memorial from when you cross over Kirk Park or the Creek Walk, as well as come from other areas through Kirk Park. But that's the general idea.
Just, we could get more information on
Yes.
that before we designate $250,000. I think it's a great
For
idea.
comparison, just for pricing, while I don't have a design for
Well, I was
that,
going to ask you about a comparison.
so for comparison,
How about this, how about the Vietnam Memorial? How much did that cost?
so not, I don't have a price on that, but for comparison for Fayette Park, Firefighters Park, that's been an outside project as well by the firefighters, the retired ones, and they have a quote, an itemized quote for $230,000 to renovate the brick paths and create a memorial in an already established park. So I do think that that's in the ballpark of what we're looking at.
All we want to know is more information on it. What
Okay.
things are going to cost.
I will follow up with you to get the information you need.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm going to hold on to both of these.
Okay.
In advance of the agenda. Is that it,
I have two other non-ARPA items.
Okay.
So I have a request for a donation from Camp 415 or Camp 415 for a memorial in Foreman Park to memorialize Willie Gilbert, who was the first Black American police officer sworn into the city. Okay. And then I have enter into an agreement with Galaxy Communications. This is the third year. We'd like to change it a little bit this year, but basically we have worked with them to promote Skates in the City, which is skating at both Clinton Square and Sunnycrest Ice Rink.
I compliment you on your negotiations here.
Thank you. So the
It
change.
used to cost us money,
We used to, while we did see increased participants at our location, we used to have to give some of our admission to them, and I said no. So they will provide the advertisement, we give them nothing. So if we even get 5 more people as a result of their promotions, we keep that.
Any questions, Commissioner?
Yeah, so just because in the past, it's been like a share with them, basically, so that's gone, now they're just.
I just don't feel comfortable, and I didn't feel comfortable doing it last year because we're still in a pandemic.
Sure.
We can't, so pre-pandemic, the previous agreement made sense. Doesn't make sense anymore. It's not, I don't like it for the city, so that's why we changed the terms.
Okay. And it's similar to what we did this last time, or we just changed from?
Last year?
Yes.
So yeah, so you'll hear on the radio the same way you hear Lights on the Lake, you'll hear Skates in the City, nonstop. They might get a sponsor, but at the end of the day, we don't owe them anything.
All right.
Any questions from my Parks Committee or any questions from any other colleagues? No? Okay. I think we're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. The only two we're holding are the Kirk Park and the Spirit of Jubilee.
I'm up? Okay. The first item looks like it's Lafayette High Service District improvements from the Water Department.
I think Commissioner Robinson is anxious. He wanted to go first.
Oh, how many items do we have from?
No. Go ahead. Do your thing.
Well, if it was like one item, that's it. But, yeah, so, walk us through
Again,
this.
Beth Smith from the Water Department. This is requesting permission to apply for and enter into an agreement with the EFC for not to exceed amount of $3 million. This project is currently underway. It has been previously authorized. The grant was announced in September. It is due November 22nd.
Are there any questions from my colleagues on this item or any other topics?
Beth?
Yes. Council.
I was sort of hoping that the commissioner would be here, because I have an issue in my council district that I've talked to him a couple times on, and I've talked to members of the administration about a particular work project that hasn't been done on the corner of Tennyson and South Lowell, where kids gather to catch a bus to school. There's two giant blocks of granite there. And there's a project waiting to be done, I guess, and he says the contractor is going to do it. And I continually get calls from my constituents about this potential problem here. It is a problem. It could be a serious problem when these kids gets hurt jumping around it. So I'm going to ask Councilor Carney to hold all the water department items until that problem goes away. I've talked to people in the administration, I'm blue in the face. I've talked to Commissioner Awad. So I'm going to ask him those three items, if he could hold on to that until we have some sort of resolution of this problem I have in my council district.
Sure, I will. Councilor Awald is away at a conference today, but I will certainly relay that information to him.
Well, maybe you can call that contractor.
I will text him.
Yes.
So, based on Councilor Hogan's request, I'm gonna hold all the water items till that's addressed. So,
Thank you.
thank you. You're up.
Quick and easy. This is a renewal agreement with Central Upstate and Syracuse Housing for
salt, right?
Salt, yeah.
Okay, are there any questions on those items? It's similar to what we do with gas, just now it's with the road salt, correct?
Yes.
Any questions, concerns about that? No? Okay, we'll move those items.
Councilor Hogan, if I may ask, is there an issue that I can solve for the?
You might want to talk to the water department. Yeah, I was hesitant about calling you, Commissioner Robinson, because it seems like I call you all the time.
What's the issue? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
There's large pieces of granite block on the corner of Tennyson and Lowell. It's part of a fire hydrant that was being redone. A contractor was doing it. And they haven't, and it's just like a real hazard there.
I'll check it.
You know, Commissioner Robinson, I want to thank you also for what you did on the creek walk. That was, you responded to that, and you've enhanced the public safety of that creek walk for the city immeasurably. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'm always here.
I think just the last item is ordinance with the railway.
Yeah, correct. Two items. The first item is an agreement with the railroad, New York, Susquehanna, and Western Railroad, to enter an agreement for $19,000 as part of the city's East Brighton Ave reconstruction project. It's East Brighton over the railroad, just past Ainsley. Railroad bridge, or the city bridge over the railroad.
John, is there anything that could be done to address railroad tracks across like 7th North Street to make them more easier for vehicular traffic? I know they're still in use, those railroad tracks are.
Yeah, that's the problem. They're still in use.
And that's nothing you can do?
The railroad is very reluctant to give up their rights to their tracks.
Okay.
Like
I mean, I'm not talking about ripping them up. Is there anything we can do to maybe make it easier so people don't lose their undercarriage when they drive through up?
I know
7
DBW
North?
did do repaving out there several years ago. Again, we'd have to really talk to the railroad. It'd be improvements to their tracks.
Okay.
More the pavement.
Thank you, John.
Okay, there was a second item to Temple Street Sewer for engineering.
Yeah.
Okay, that's to accept the reconstruction of the 18-inch combined sewer and accept easement associated with it as part of National Grid's expansion of their substation in the area.
Okay. there any questions on either of those items? All right, hearing none, I'll make a motion to put those on the agenda.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I believe those are all of our items holding all of water until Councilor Hogan's issues are addressed. And those are my items for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carney.
You got it.
That me? All right, fire department first.
Good afternoon. I'm Chief Mons, the fire chief. The first item is for the Syracuse Fire Department to accept money from Syracuse University and to set up an account to have the money deposited into. And this is, the university is going to pay our firefighters to go up and pre-plan in case if there's an emergency for a high angle or a confined space emergency up there. So we basically partner with them to show our folks if there's an emergency, what they would need to do in the case of an emergency, and they agreed to pay our firefighters for the time they went and did a pre-plan and train. So I'm just asking for permission to accept that money, and that will be $7,000.
Is this the first time this happened, Chief, or
No,
this every year?
We've done it previously. I mean, they just, they rebuilt the dome, and there's different construction up there. So just to familiarize ourselves with if somebody got stuck up there or a construction worker, just so our folks know exactly where to go and how to get up to the roof and things like that. So we plan on to continue doing these types of things with SU, and Pete Sallow's been more than happy to pay our firefighters to go up and get this training, and he understands our budget needs. So,
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
the second legislation item I have, we applied for another grant. This is to ask permission from the council to go into an agreement with the Leary Foundation. If we receive this grant, we will be getting airlift bags, and these bags are used to lift heavy pieces of concrete or any large items. We're anticipating to use these types of items for like the 81 construction project. If something goes bad there, we'll have some equipment to help free somebody up. So this grant is for $20,000. There's no local match. And if we do get awarded the grant, I'm also asking for the Commissioner of Finance with your approval to set up an account to have the grant money funded. So those are my two items.
Yeah, I think it's a good proactive move considering where we are going with I-81. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Any questions?
All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Going to sing for us before you?
I got quite a few items, so, 4, I think. Hi, Joe Cecil, First Deputy Chief with Syracuse Police Department. The first item is a waiver of the RFP to enter a contract with Dr. Norman Westwing. We've used him for many years as an on-needed basis for fit for duty status. So we would use him when an officer has been out, for instance, on an officer-involved shooting, but also if we have an officer that's out on a medical issue or on-duty injury for an extended period of time and is returning to work. We would bring Dr. Westwing in to do that fit for duty. It's approximately $250 an hour. Each evaluation is about $625. We're asking for $5,000 per year, no more than $5,000. And again, this is on a per diem basis. We don't hand them $5,000. If we need them, we use this money. And he has offices right downtown. And again, we've used him for, I think, it goes back at least 10 years that I can remember it, probably beyond that.
Now, how does this work in conjunction with the wellness app?
Sure. So the wellness app is a separate thing. We have Dr. Fish for that, Ronald Fish. He wanted that to be separate. We wanted it to be separate because it's a little bit different than a fit for duty than when you're talking to officers about ongoing trauma or things like that. So they're totally separate doctors, totally separate types of evaluations.
Will the analysis from the wellness app somehow cross over to what he's doing? Will it inform what he's doing? Because this is psychological kind of evaluation kind of work, right?
Yeah, it does make perfect sense, Counselor, and it will cross over. So after he does his fit for duty, and basically he's basically telling us this officer is fit to go back on the road. We bring the officer back, and we're going to certainly connect him with him or her with peer support. We're going to encourage him or her to use the Cortico app and all those things. So that's where you see the crossover. But this particular doctor just simply tells us this officer is fit to come back on the job.
Other questions?
I have a quick question. Do we do any type of profiling or psychological testing of the cadets before we accept them into employment?
Oh, yes. They go through a psychological. All the recruits, before we hire them, go through psychologicals.
Understood. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Counselor, I have a question. Chief, so this may be more for the deputy mayor, but I guess, do we do this for other departments? And if so, does it make sense to centralize this, to have kind of a chief medical officer or someone like that that would do fire, DPW? Because I'd imagine there's entry on duties for multiple departments, and it may be a scale thing where it would make sense to combine it.
It's a good point. We can look into that.
Okay, thanks.
I can imagine the stress of plowing during Syracuse winters. It may not be equal to the police, but it is stressful.
It's unique, but the position is a position, and may have, so.
Other questions? All right.
Okay, item 29, I have Jimmy Oliver here. He's going to speak on this one. Has to do with the Police Athletic Week. Jimmy, thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Jimmy Oliver, Director of Community Engagement for the Police Department. We're looking to enter an agreement with Marcus Brooks to provide board development for the Syracuse PAL, Board of Directors. It's for $11,000.
I guess my question here is, I know places like Gifford Foundation, Community Foundation, I know what they have done with the community here in terms of board development, prepping or a nonprofit organization to be on a pathway of, moving forward, right? Now, what have we talked to them about maybe donating some of their time rather than, spending?
Absolutely. That's a fair question. The advisory committee that helped put the Syracuse PAL program together, a couple of us went and met with those different agencies that you talked about, because those were best practices here in the city of Syracuse. We presented what we would like to do. They didn't feel like that's the direction we should go, and we decided to go with Marcus.
And I guess my question is, like, with PAL being new, and this organization being able to provide, startup, funds and stuff like that. I'm wondering if that conversation came up rather than city spending 11,000. Is there a way they could incorporate what we are asking here into what they do? And has that conversation occurred in terms of them covering financially as opposed to using?
Well, that conversation was happening, but they wanted to push us into what traditionally happens. And with PAL being new, we wanted to bring a different perspective. And again, the folks who were in the room, if I must be frank, kind of, mocked our way we wanted to do it. And it didn't necessarily, to me and the folks who were in the room, felt like it was in best interest of Syracuse PAL. So we decided to go in a different direction.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a brief question. Thank you, Mr. Oliver, for being here. So I'm wondering, in the letter, it states that the company's goal is to bring high-quality advisory and execution capabilities to clients who share a common interest in emotional intelligence, integrity, and intestinal fortitude. And I'm wondering, how does that relate to the mission of the Police Athletic League?
Well, we want to make sure that the folks that are on the PAL board are folks who are on the ground, who bring those different skill sets to our community, not just youth, not just teens, but the community overall. And I think with what Marcus and his team does, brings all of those different perspectives in. Again, the group that we put together as the advisory committee comes from different walks of life. We have folks who've been on multiple boards. We've had folks who have not. Our goal was to be able to create cohesion amongst these individuals and build that team collaborative, so that when we did move to the next level, that the board would be able to do, to do that, if I answered your question correctly.
So this is specifically then for board training?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And more or less from what I understand your answer, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's for team building?
It was for team building, talking about the process of becoming a board, the different, things that would come up, in board, whether it's the officers, what does that look like? What are some of the items, pushing the mission of PAL, pushing our values. We wanted to make sure that all the people that were on this board were all on the same page, and Marcus and his team would be able to talk through and come up with some brainstorming activities, some breakout sessions where we would talk about those different topics.
I mean,
Ongoing training, or is it just like a one-time thing for this?
It was three. We started in July 9th was our first session. Okay. August 17th was our second, and we just finished it up on September 28th.
So I'm sorry, Councilor Allen, if I may. So does that mean then that you've already engaged Mr. Brooks, and now you're coming back to us retroactively to approve to pay him?
In retrospect, yes, because originally we did not have. When we went to the Gifford Foundation and the Community Foundation to help with that cost, it wasn't. And so taking that back to Marcus and his team, he said we should still move forward with making this happen, because we had so much traction. The folks who wanted to be a part of this board had a lot of energy, enthusiasm, and we didn't want to stop that.
Do we know, Mr. Oliver, I'm sorry to grill you here, where these funds would be coming from then? Where they designated to come from? Is it from your budget? Where are we looking to spend this money from?
Yeah, I want to say.
I'm not positive. So we can find that out for you, Counselor. I think we budgeted for it, but I'm not positive. But I'll get you that answer as soon as I get back to the office.
So after having further conversation, we're looking to have this come out of the ARPA funds that has been allocated towards PAL, which is $300,000 that been advocated for one-time infrastructure, kind of building capacity for PAL. So when you think of, we need vans for transportation, we talk about a software where we can measure and track, the participants, what we're doing, budgeting things. Yeah.
Sure, no, I understand now, and I just would comment that I think would be the better practice, to try and get to the council ahead of time before coming back retroactively.
I take full responsibility of that.
It's not a reflection of you, Jimmy, at all.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Jimmy. You dropped your mask.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Joe, given the fact that it is through the funds that you've already approved for PAL, then there's no need for a letter for this.
Well, we have to, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor, but wouldn't we have to approve the agreement?
Approve the agreement, yes. So
Okay.
just tell us
Yeah.
how to get modified.
Could, work with John to, I guess, yeah, that works. Chief?
Item 30 is a request to reopen, basically it's to reopen the Axon contract for our body cams, to use some ARPA funds, the amount of $343,260 to purchase 60 more body cams. We currently have 220. As all of you know, we want to purchase 60 more of them. The idea is to outfit the 35 officers that we have in the academy that will graduate in December. So when they hit the streets, they will already be trained and outfitted with body cams. And then the additional ones will be for the academy that we've scheduled to follow that one and start in January of 2022. I just want to mention with the numbers, 60 is what we need right now. That may adjust as we go forward with resignations and retirements, which we're seeing on a regular basis now. So, which frees up a body cam, and so these numbers may change. But currently, this is the number. 60 is the number we would need to purchase to outfit new recruits so that they have them so they have them before they get out of the academy.
Are you guys now, so because this is still kind of new, so with your new recruits, do you guys train them as if they have body cams on?
We do. It's one of the last things they do just before they graduate. There's an actual, it's almost a full week of training with the body cam, and that kind of thing. Yep.
Two things, if you don't mind. Are we basically swapping out funding sources here? Right, so you're just asking to use some ARPA money for this instead of some previously authorized money, or is it completely additional?
This one is the, well, we were not awarded, we were asked to spend $2 million. This is part of that $2 million that the police department was allocated by the city.
No, got it. And then my second question is just a more general question. Are members of, a task force per se, so officers that aren't necessarily in complete uniform, are they outfitted with body cams?
So, right, it's all uniformed officers.
Sure,
and that, yes, that includes patrol, traffic, K-9, anyone you see in a uniform. Typically, if they're not in a uniform, you won't see them with a body cam.
Okay, and that includes, again, like a task force type thing where, they have the police, indicating police badge, but they're not necessarily in a full, what we would consider, or every citizen would consider a full uniform, right? Would that include them?
Yes, Counselor, it would include them. We've outfitted the gang task force and some of the other task force when they're out on the street. So when I say non-uniform, I'm talking the detectives that are in CID or SID.
Okay.
Yep.
I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For clarification, Chief, does this mean that every officer at this point, after this, would have cameras, uniform officers?
Correct, and it means, yeah, so currently right now, even with the 220, we have, every uniformed officer has one. In fact, we were able to outfit, because we didn't plan for it, but we had retirements and resignations, even the sergeants that are in patrol all have body cams now. So this will allow us, yes, as we get additional personnel on, meaning the 35 that are in the academy, they would exit that academy without body cams if we didn't do this.
Questions? No? All right, last one, right?
There may be two more. There could be two more, I think, I'm not sure. So 32 is a request to enter into a contract with Veterinarian Specialty Center of CNY. It's up in DeWitt. It's a 24-hour, it's the one on Bridge Street. It's a 24-hour, 7-day emergency veterinarian care. It would be to lodge our animals that are the victims of cruelty and abuse. And the price tag not to exceed $50,000.
Questions?
Since we're on dog control, sort of, is there any way we could use ARPA money to supplement the phone system for dog control? Because right now, Chief, we get calls about phone not being answered, and I did a little detective work, and I actually found out why. We only got one line in there. So when two people call in at the same time, the guy's on the line, it just rings and rings and rings and rings, thinking that there's no response. So is there any way we can maybe use monies to do that?
And there's no voicemail either.
And there's no voicemail on it either.
Well, we can take a look at that.
It's only 2021, I mean, is there any way, I know that was sort of like a move that was fast and all that, but I think that would probably alleviate a lot of the concerns in the neighborhoods.
I'll take a look at it and see. We may not even have to spend any money on it. If
Yeah.
it's just another line or a voicemail or something of that nature, I'll take a
I
look
talked to
at
the
it.
dog control guy, Saki, and he says that's what happens. He says, that's why.
Before we let you go on this item,
Voicemail.
I don't have this,
I don't even know what he's talking about.
I don't have a specific question, but I would just note that the letter states Humane C&Y. Do they operate that, that facility over there on Bridge Street? I don't believe that they do.
My guess is, Council, I'll look into it. I know this letter's been the same for several years now. Let me find out about that. My guess is yes, but let me make sure. I'll send you an email.
Other questions?
No, that's,
Good?
yes, I'm okay, Councilor Michelle.
All right, go to the last one.
There's one more.
Last one.
There's one more.
Yes.
Okay, so 33 is to enter, again, it's to waive the RFP for Dr. Fish. I mentioned him earlier. He has been working with us, with our peer support group for several years now. He goes to roll calls. The officers know him very well. He also helped us with the Cortico app when we were creating a network of therapists for the officers to use for that, on that Cortico app, which all of you approved. This particular contract is so that he can come in and train some officers in peer support through retirements and resignations. It decimated our peer support team. We used to have about 17, 18 officers on that. We are down to 4 now. So we have put the word out, and we have upwards of 20 to 22 officers that want to go through the peer support training, and this money would allow Dr. Fish to come in and train them so they could become part of that peer support.
I have an idea what peer support team would look like, but what is that?
Sure, so it's a bunch of officers. Again, it's only 4 now, but it used to be a bunch of officers. When an officer on the street is going through some type of crisis, whether it's something work-related or even off the job, they would typically they'd pick up their phone and dial numbers. Now, with the Cortico app, all these officers are listed on there. So they would reach out to this officer to see if they could walk them through something that they perhaps have gone through, or because they've been through some training, they can walk them through something that helps them out when they're going through some crisis. Again, the vast majority of it is things that they've dealt with on the job. That's why it's best to have officers as peer support, because they've dealt with the same thing.
Okay, so it's like a support system. Okay. Questions? All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
So we got all the item. We move them along.
Yep.
Yeah, that's adjourned.
Right.